I had been an EMT in an earlier life, and I remembered our training instructor saying, be careful what you say around stroke victims, because even though they may not be able to speak or respond, they can often hear and understand what you're saying. But holy shit. I mean, I didn't want to say this stuff in private. I didn't want to share my feelings, in secret. And here I am in a busy emergency room. The other families are closer than the interpreter here, with nothing but a curtain between us. But eventually, I knew I really wanted to say it. So I got up all my courage. So this story began some years ago when I started seeing a new psychotherapist. And in the first session, he started with the usual questions about me and my family of origin. Are your parents alive? Yeah. How do you feel about them? Do you love them? Yeah. Have you ever told them that you love them? Well, no. Well, that's interesting. It's curious. Why haven't you ever told them that? Well, I don't know. I mean, in our family, we kind of don't talk about, emotional, those kinds of things. He says, I'd like you to consider telling your parents how you feel about them. Now, what my therapist was asking was that I violate a major family taboo. When I said we don't talk about those things, I meant we really don't talk about them. I had never heard my parents verbalize their feelings for each other, for their parents, for me or my brother. It just wasn't done. Why were my parents like this? Well, they had both grown up in large immigrant families that had their share of troubles. My mother's father died in the Spanish flu epidemic after World War I. He was very young. The funeral was emotionally very raw, with people tearing their clothes and jumping in the grave. My mother was 7 or 8 at the time, young enough to be confused and scared by the scene, old enough to be embarrassed. She never talked much about it, but I know that her older brother said that he decided the day of that funeral he would never show his feelings to anybody. My father grew up in a large Italian family that also had its emotional scenes and emotional outbursts. And he seems to have come out of it with the sense that to be successful in life, you had to have self-control, which to him meant keeping his emotions tightly wrapped. One time when I was an adult, I said something to him about kind of, where were your emotions? I didn't mean it to come across that way, but I guess it did. And he dismissed me with the comment, I have emotions when they serve a purpose. So I grew up without any emotional vocabulary. If you had asked me to name 5 emotions, I couldn't have done it. But my therapist, he kept at it. I think he realized that he was onto something important about my emotional makeup, such as it was. So he kept asking me about this. He persisted. I resisted. Every session was like So, talk to your parents yet? No. You gonna do it? Yeah. When? No, 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 no. Uh, well, one day he had had enough. He said, today is Thursday. By Saturday, I want you to make a date to go see your parents and call me, tell me when it is. So the following Monday night, I'm driving out to where they live in a senior center out near Leisure World. And of course, the whole way out there, I'm obsessing about what am I going to say? How am I going to say it? And what's the follow-up conversation going to be like? Or, more importantly, is there going to be any follow-up conversation? Or is my great declaration of love going to kind of disappear into the atmosphere and everybody sit around feeling uncomfortable and awkward until my mother brings out the coffee cake and the decaf and I go home feeling kind of strangely deflated? Didn't turn out that way. I walked into the building where they lived, and as I passed the front desk, the receptionist was on the walkie-talkie with somebody, and I heard the voice on the other end say, "Call 911." I went up the elevator. I was walking down the long hall toward their apartment. I heard the other elevator door open behind me. And then a woman's voice called down the hall, "Are you the Delibert boy?" I turned around. She said, "Can you come down to the dining area? Something's happened to your mother." Went down the elevator with her. We didn't talk. I was remembering the voice on the walkie-talkie, "Call 911." In the dining area, my mother was seated in a chair. My father was standing next to her, looking worried and helpless. A lot of their friends were standing around. I didn't even get to talk to them before the medics arrived. They did their thing. When they picked up my mother out of the chair, one whole side of her body was hanging limp. She had had a stroke, and a very bad one. When I saw that, my heart really sank. My mother was no stranger to life-threatening ailments, and she was a trooper. She had had breast cancer twice in the days when a lot of women didn't survive at all. She had been blasted with radiation. She had had 2 heart attacks and a triple bypass surgery. But this was different. This was a situation about which my mother always said, "If I ever get like that, shoot me." Well, I drove my father over to Montgomery General, joined my mother in the ER, and for hours we stood on either side of the bed and then sat on either side of the bed, holding her hands. Neither one of us seemed to have anything to say that seemed adequate to the situation. But I remembered why I had come to see my parents. Now, I had been an EMT in an earlier life, and I remembered our training instructor saying, "Be careful what you say around stroke victims, because even though they may not be able to speak or respond, they can often hear and understand what you're saying." But holy shit. I mean, I didn't want to say this stuff in private. I didn't want to share my feelings, in secret. And here I am in a busy emergency room. The other families are closer than the interpreter here, with nothing but a curtain between us. But eventually, I knew I really wanted to say it. So I got up all my courage. I leaned over the bed. and I said, I came to see you tonight because I wanted to tell you something, and I'm going to tell you. I want you to know that I really love you both, and I really appreciate everything you put into raising me. And my mother, with the half of her face that she could still control, she smiled. And I knew that she had heard what I said. And later that night, when I left the hospital, I left with the realization that I had come this close to never being able to tell her. Thank you.
To say